You see, a number of Caribbean countries have recently issued procurement notices or announced the planned implementation of national government issued digital IDs. For example, in my own country, Jamaica, here in Barbados that I live, the Bahamas and Trinidad and Tobago, to name a few. These digital IDs will include, most likely include, biometric identifiers that authenticate or verify identity based on physical characteristics such as fingerprints, iris, face and palm prints, voice, and even DNA. While supporters argue that biometric identifiers are an efficient way to accurately identify people, biometrics are costly, prone to error, and present extreme risks to privacy and individual freedom. And we're going to talk a lot about that. We do have Niel Harper here, who is a son of Barbados, a son of the soil. He's currently living in Germany, and he spent the last 20 years as a trusted advisor to global organizations and governments in the areas of ICT regulation and digital policy, corporate governance, cybersecurity management, privacy program management, digital transformation, and enterprise risk management. Mr. Niel Harper has senior leadership and an advisory experience in over 15 countries with organizations such as AT&T, BMOL, Canonical, CIBC, Deloitte, Doodle, European Union, Internet Society, and the United Nations, among others. He possesses various industry certifications in corporate governance, engineering, IT auditing, cybersecurity, privacy and data protection, and business continuity management. And let me just welcome this very, very, very able son of the soil from the Caribbean. We're going to own you. We're owning you, Niel. You're not just on Barbados. Right throughout the Caribbean, there is right now such a buzz about, digital ID. And there are many, many questions. And we want to start at the very beginning. And so we want you to explain briefly the purpose of this new Trident ID. So we want to explain briefly the purpose of this new Trident ID card, and does it differ from the physical presentation of the original ID card that we all have?
Just to be clear, that the Trident ID card is actually not in itself a digital ID. The Trident ID card is a replacement for the previous physical. It's a more longer lasting and durable card. It contains a number of security features that prevents it from being counterfeited, and it has a number of other visual impairments to really help protect the card against being counterfeited. Additionally, it's also in compliance with international standards for personal identification, travel identification. So it meets a number of standards, and it really helps to take Barbados from a physical identification card perspective to a new realm where we are more aligned with international standards. And I think where people mistake it for the digital ID itself is because of the messaging. The government's messaging has not been as effective as it should be. The digital ID is really an identification system that resides in electronic form. And that identity or identification systems allows people to interact with various type of players, whether it be the government, whether it be private organizations, lending organizations like banks. And what it really does is it provides identity proofing. it provides a source of authenticity of someone's identity. It allows, for example, if you're opening a bank account, that the person in the bank can scan your ID, or you can log into a system and verify your ID, and they can see your picture, they can see all your bio details and verify, yes, this person who's in front of me is actually the person that they say, and it's verified by the government of Barbados, who has paid
Mhm.
their
Right. I
who
think
has
they're
their
saying that just one second,
card
Mr.
itself as
Harper.
part
Uh,
of digital
but one
ID
second, Mr.
system.
Harper. Can you hear me? I think that the people are having difficulty hearing. The connection is bad.
Okay, not sure.
Let's try to see if we can correct that. The question I had asked him was to explain the purpose of the new Trident ID card, and Mr. Harper was saying that the purpose was for identification, that it is not even a digital ID card, which I'm surprised at, because that is what we're told. This is what we're told. Let's see if we can hear you now.
So I was saying before we stopped that the digital ID is really the bio data or the bio information of a citizen that's stored in a digital system, that's stored online. It can be some type of database, a public database, a government database, that allows that database to be searchable by a number of different factors. It could be the government, it could be a bank, it could be any type of institution that needs to verify the authenticity of your identity. That's called
Mhm,
identity proofing. So that's the
mhm.
digital ID, is a searchable database, an accessible database that proves your identity. The Trident ID card is just kind of the physical representation of your identity, and it's just a replacement for the previous identity card, but with more security features, with more features to allow compliance with international standards, to prevent it from being counterfeited.
Right.
But what should be, and when those two things will merge, where the digital ID in the systems and the digital ID in the card will merge, is where, when you have more government e-services or e-government services, where
Mhm,
you can use your digital ID and your PIN that you put on the ID, can use it to securely authenticate with government systems. Then they become integrated. The
ah,
actual card and the digital ID
mhm.
system will become integrated, but they're not there yet because the government doesn't have enough government transactional or interactional. Like, for example, the government of Denmark, you can undertake 1,500 plus services with the government of Denmark online
Mhm,
without leaving your home, and you use your digital ID to authenticate to these services, to
mhm,
verify your identity, so they can provide you with things like a certificate of character from the cops, from law enforcement. They can provide you with the ability to renew your passport. They
mhm,
can provide you with the ability to access government services that contain confidential information that require proof
mhm,
of identification. But we're very far away from that. So right now we have two separate things that are very separate. The
mhm.
digital ID and the biodata in a system, and the physical card.
So when we hear the minister here in Barbados talking about being able to, everything is in one. I heard a voice note that he said that you're now able to have your passport, the driver's license, everything in one, and we're basically keeping up with the world. Are you saying that we're not at that stage yet?
That's bad messaging. It's bad messaging. So, the passport is a separate identity document that has that that has to adhere to international standards for travel documents. The ICAO standard. And to have your passport and your national ID on one system is not feasible. Like the passport information is, while you can draw from the database, but when you may have a single database that contains all the biodata that's in both the passport as well as the ID card. That ID card and passports are separate documents. You can't travel with just your ID card. So you need to travel with your passport, and you can use your ID card for identification in other scenarios where a passport is not required, but they're not one in the same. And I think it's very poor messaging when we're being told that everything is one in the same. Because I've heard him say, yes, you now have your driver's license and your passport, but that's not true. What they've done is they've included the driving license information in the database, in the same database as the Trident. So when you scan the QR it takes you to a website which basically pulls from the database and shows you all the information on the front of the card plus your driving license information. But the driving license information is stored with Barbados Licensing Authority. The national ID data is stored with Electoral and Boundaries Commission. So they're different organizations who actually are responsible for the data, who may manage the systems and the databases which the information for those different pieces of identification are stored. And you can technologically bring those databases together and pull information from all of them and present them at the same time, but they're not one in the same. They're separate.
They're not one and the same. Can I ask you something? I mean, because I know a lot of people who are listening are very shocked at what you're saying this today, and I'm wondering why would they be? Why do you think that they've chosen this message to the people, to say to them that they now have this digital ID where all of their data, you're not going to need a driver's license when they're finished, and you're not going to need, is it that they're saying that this is going to come very soon?
No, so here's and I'm a very frank person. People who know me know I'm very frank. I think we have a tendency in the region, in the Caribbean region, to award people ministries based on the fact that they've won a parliamentary seat. We don't award people ministries based on their expertise. So in Barbados right now, we have a Minister of Information and Smart Technology that has no technology background. He doesn't understand technology. He tries to explain technology that he doesn't understand, and he regularly makes a number of mistakes, a number of faux pas, because he can't explain something that's not his specialization. We have a Minister of Health. We had a previous Minister of Health who was not a health administrator. Like we put a lot of square pegs in round holes and then expect them to drive transformation. And I think that's part of the problem that impedes our progress. Right now, we're traditionally we've managed a lot of information in the public sector through registers, books, like physical books. We would write, like marriage certificates, we would write them in a book, or registration information we would write in a book. And through digital transformation, we're moving a lot of that information into online systems. Also, we're going through multiple stages of e-government. The first stage of e-government is informational, where you present information to people on websites, and that's fine. But we have to go through the full stage where we're going from informational to transactional, and then people will start not to just be able to get information online, but they also start to conduct transactions online. For example, we have the Pay Plus in Barbados, where you can pay for your driver's license, you can pay to renew certain things online. That's transactional. So as we bring more and more in this information online, we can submit our taxes online, we can submit for police certificates of character online. We're putting more and more personal data online. And the more and more of this personal data you put online, you expose people to privacy risk, especially if the government does not do a good job of securing these systems on which they are presenting this data in an understandable format to people to consume. So there's still the privacy risks are actually now it's increasing, because for the Trident card, but when you scan the back of the card, there's a QR code that takes you to a website. That website contains your first name, last name, date of birth, nationality, gender, and now it also includes your driving license, etc. That's a lot of personal data. That's personal data. If that is breached, if that's accessible by fraudsters and scammers, they can steal your identity. They can perpetrate fraud.
I'm going to stop you here, Mr. Harper, because here we have Mr. Harper is a trained professional in cybersecurity, guys, and he is saying to us that the present Trident card, although it's not yet connected up to the biometrics structure as of yet, however, that Trident ID card, it's very dangerous at this. Well, I'm using the word dangerous, it seems to me, because you're saying that at the moment, the way it is set up, the hackers or whoever can get our private information from that. I'm seeing a question here from Mr. James Hilton. Is saying, but isn't that already on your ID card? And the minister said that if you lost your motor vehicle ID card, if you can get the same information can be got from what you got from the QR code. Is that true?
So I think that's a very, very bad reasoning or rationale. So most people are saying, hey, what's the big deal? Like if you lose your card, that's not a big deal. That's not a privacy risk. But there is information on the card that is not public information. Your national registration is not public information. There's nowhere that the entire public of Barbados or the global internet public should be able to go and get your national registration or your driving license number. Those are unique identifiers that are matched back to your identity. If that information is breached widely, it can be used to perpetrate fraud. And I think people keep saying, but it's not a big deal. You put all your information on Facebook and Instagram, but it's still not true. That's a false argument, because no one in their right mind puts their national registration number or driving license on Facebook. No one scans their passport and puts it on Facebook. People, those are private documents that are used for particular use cases. You take your passport and you show it to someone at a counter at the airport to, and they allow you to get your boarding pass. You
Mm-hmm.
take it when you're getting on to the plane, and you show it to the person with the pass so they can prove it's you. That's a one-to-one exchange.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a
Work.
1 to 200,000 or 1 to 4 million exchange. 4 million
Exactly.
people aren't seeing your information. One person is.
Wow.
So people need to stop saying, "Oh, well, it's public data." No, it's not public. That's not public. There's nowhere in the world, nowhere. It's illegal in the United States, illegal in Canada, illegal in European Union, illegal. All of these countries do not allow for the publishing of national registration numbers. They do not allow for the publishing of your date of birth, your gender. If you look at most of these places, the most information you can get on a person, even if it's for like an electors list or something, you can get their name, first name, last name, and their address. Date of
Mm.
birth is unique to you. National registration number is unique to you. The driving license number is unique to you. Unique identifiers allow for greater um, privacy risk.
This is groundbreaking, guys. Here we do have a cybersecurity professional, living in Germany, worked over 20 years in this field, and he's telling us this is a danger to the public. And I guess it's no wonder. I don't know if you know, Mr. Harper, but I saw where I believe it's the DLP president is saying to Barbadians, please don't take that card. No, speaking to you, I understand why he might be saying that.
So just to kind of clarify things, the card itself is not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
The actual information on the card being accessible on the web is not a problem in itself. Where there's a risk that exists. One, for example, in other countries, you can't scan a government ID card with just a normal phone. You cannot scan it. The particular the government has an encryption keys that only that government can see the QR code. But what the government has done, they've eliminated that. They've left out that the government developed particular cell app that you can download, and they usually allow it to be downloaded by banks, by credit card companies, by insurance companies that need to use it to prove your identity. And only that particular government app can read the QR code from the back of your phone, because the QR code contains an encryption key that restricts who can scan it. But what is happening with the Trident card, there's no encryption key. You can take any phone, a Samsung, an iPhone, any phone that can read a QR code and scan it. And that increases the risk. That's one way that it increases the risk. The second way that it increases the risk is if the website that presents the information from the card, if that website is not properly secured, then someone can hack that website and they can access everyone's personal information. And the reason that their concerns being expressed, the government of Barbados has a terrible history of protecting online systems. Very terrible history. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Barbados has been down since the first week of December from a cyber attack. It's still down. Many parts of it is still down. In the last 5 years, we've seen the Royal Barbados Police, their website has been hacked. the Supreme Court of Barbados, their website has been hacked. The Immigration Department has been hacked. Financial Services Commission has been hacked. The Office of the Attorney General has been hacked. The National Insurance Scheme has been hacked. So and what I keep trying to tell people, I'm not saying that this system is not secure. I'm saying because of the government's history of not properly securing online systems, it increases the risk that the online system storing your bio data is not secure. Also, the fact that they're not using encryption to restrict who can scan the the QR codes means that it also increases the risk. And I think that's what the public of Barbados doesn't seem to understand. The the opposition leader or the president of the Democratic Labour Party is not saying that the card is by default insecure. He's saying because of all these issues that we're seeing, because the government has not implemented online services properly, you should be mindful of getting this card until they fix these problems. And to some degree, I think he has a good point.
Yes, a good point. So I want to just clarify, because we tend to be very, in the Caribbean, not just Barbados. I'm from Jamaica, and we tend to be very partisan. Let's just declare your hand today. The first time meeting you was online today, and we chatted, and I realized that you were living outside of Barbados so many years. What's your association here in Barbados?
I'm not a supporter of any party. I always tell people this. I've done work for the government of Barbados when it was the DLP. I've done work for the government of Barbados when it was the PLP. I have not gone into a poll and I've not voted in probably 20 years. I'm not in Barbados, so and there some people have alluded to the fact and saying, oh yeah, he's a Democratic Labour Party supporter, but I'm not. Anyone that knows me would know I'm very, very agnostic when it comes to partisan politics.
So let me ask you, what is your motivation, Mr. Harper? You are a professional. You're working in Germany. That's what you're doing. You don't live here. Why did you even come on this program to sound this serious alarm to the Barbadian public?
So I've worked in digital trust for the last 23 years. Everywhere I've worked in the world, I've worked in the digital trust. My previous job, I was the international head of cybersecurity at the United Nations. I've worked as chief information security officer for a retail company in Brazil. I've worked as chief information security officer for a software company in London, for software companies in Berlin. I am a passionate person about digital trust. I have seen up close what happens when people's identity are stolen. The amount of impact from damage to their reputation, financial loss, from there's so much emotional trauma. Sometimes you can even get in trouble with the law. I've worked for banks, which I protected banks. I've worked for CIBC. I've worked for Bermuda Commercial Bank. I have seen firsthand what happens when people's personal data is lost or compromised, and the damage is significant. And anyone that knows me, I spend my time speaking. I speak at World Economic Forum. I speak on conferences. I speak on panels. I'm always speaking about security and privacy because that's my passion. So and that's the reason I've been trying to educate the persons in Barbados, and people are like, yeah, it's not a big deal, but you're hearing from someone who's an expert that does this for a living saying to you, yes, it
Right.
is a big problem, and people are still saying, no, it's not a big problem. Who cares? And the reason that I spend that time is because I know the impact, and I don't think that people recognize themselves what is the actual impact. For example, last year, January, for elections in Barbados, the government of Barbados leaked the full election list. All 250,000 people on the election list, they leaked it onto the public internet. So 4.6 billion people could access the
And
persons of
let's
Barbados.
hasten to say that they didn't do it deliberately. It was a mistake. That's
It
right.
was a mistake, but it was a mistake because of lack of knowledge and understanding. But it's still a leak. It's still a leak regardless, and it still has a impact. So they they were told by the law, the change in the law, you had to publish the information online. And yes, there's nothing wrong with publishing the information online in a restricted format. You publish name and
Mm.
address, right? Just name and address. You don't publish name, address, date of birth, national registration number, gender. You don't publish all this information. And this information, before it, as soon as it hit the internet, it was in the dark web, it was in Reddit, it was in 4chan, and people were sharing this information. And now I've been hearing over the last year, there's been a rush of identity theft in Barbados because of the leaking of this information. And Barbadians are saying, "Oh, the banks are getting
Ah.
but the banks are not being hacked. The banks have not been hacked. Some credit unions in Barbados may have been hacked, but what people are doing is using the identity to perpetrate fraud, to
Oh my.
take out bank accounts in people's names, to take out services in people's name, to fraud people, to create on Facebook, to create a profile that has all your information. So when your friends see it, they think it's on you.
So, Mr. Harper, I'm just gonna stop you there because I mean, this is new knowledge, news to me. So, you're saying that possibly from the leak that happened mistakenly by the government when during the election, with all how many hundreds of thousands of agents' information, I guess mine was out there as well. That it really has seriously, in your estimation, put some of our citizens at risk. And you're saying that some of what we're seeing happening in the banking system, and one lady saying she had to change 3 cards within the last year, you're saying that could be part of the reason that this is happening to
Yes,
us here. So you're
yes,
saying you're basically saying that based on what the government did, we're like sitting ducks then waiting for something to happen to us.
and this is something I've seen across the world. That personal data protection is a very serious thing. If you look at the European Union, it's a serious thing. Personal data, if personal data is not properly processed, you can be fined 4% of your revenue as a business based on the law. You're seeing fines that Facebook has received for violating personal data laws of 400 million, 600 million, $2 billion fines. Companies are being fined because when you don't properly process and protect people's personal data, it damages them, it impacts their rights, it damages
Mm.
them personally, from a financial, from a reputation perspective. And I don't think people have built that linkage. People are like, because the government tends to double down. The government was like, yeah, it's not a big deal. That information is public, and they've said it, and they've said it, and they've said it, and Barbadians said, okay, fine, that's public. It's not public. All of that information should never be available publicly, because it will impact the rights of individuals. And that's something that I can't say enough.
The thing is, right now, based on what this professional is saying, he is giving us advice, and he's saying to us at the present moment the state of the Trident ID card, right? There's a privacy risk here, guys, and it is a serious one. And we really need to take off the party hats and listen. What do you recommend the government of Barbados do to beef up the cybersecurity of the Trident ID card?
So just the Trident and card, or to beef up cybersecurity
Cybersecurity,
as
I
a
think
whole.
cybersecurity
Okay.
on a whole, because this is a mess. You just name. Can you list the government entities that have been hacked? This is ridiculous. Can you list them again?
Yeah, sure. I actually have a list which I mean thing, because I keep a list, an ongoing list, just to be sure. And mind you, these are just the ones that I know about. I'm pretty sure there are a number of other ones. So the ones I know about are the Queen Elizabeth Hospital,
Mm-hmm.
Immigration Department, Statistics Department, Financial Services Commission, the Supreme Court of Barbados, Office of
What?
the Attorney General, the Barbados and Police Service, 1 Year Welcome Stamp website, the Government Information Service, Barbados Audit Office, Ministry of Information and Smart Technology, National Insurance Scheme, Urban Development Commission, Ministry of Tourism, National Council on Science and Technology, Ministry of Civil Service, and Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. All of those have
What?
been hacked in the last
What?
5 to
Even the
7
office.
years.
What's hilarious is that the office of the Ministry of the Smart Technology, even they were hacked. This is crazy. The office of the Attorney General. First of all, there are two things that this gentleman has said today, Mr. Harper, is that the messaging is incorrect, that they're telling us about the Trident ID card. It cannot do all those things that they're saying that it can do, not at this moment. And then, second of all, the QR code on the back, it is not properly, there is something else that needs to be done with it so that people would not be able to get your information, and it poses a threat to our security. And eventually, it is going to affect us economically, because we've been told, people are talking about how many cards, the bank cards that they've had to change. And so our government is allowing us to sit in here like sitting ducks. And this is why I'm not pushing any party, guys. This is why Ronnie Yearwood, even before he was the president, I read something just before I came on, Mr. Harper. I saw it where I read something in 2021. Ronnie,
Yeah.
before when he was just a lecturer, I have it here on my phone, was telling people, do not collect that card.
We
So
both did in 2021, before he was even involved in with the Democratic Labour Party, when they were launching the National Identity Management System legislation. We sat down and we did a detailed breakdown of all of the problems with the national ID legislation, and we talked about disability and accessibility, oversight and liability, notification when people's data is breached, like people's rights and discrimination. Like we did a detailed review of the legislation, and we sent it to the government of Barbados, and they did nothing. They still went ahead with the same legislation. And then on top of that, I turned around and I wrote a detailed article that was titled "Too Many Unanswered Questions: The Barbados National Digital ID." And that was back in 2021, and I broke it down, all of the things they needed to do to make sure that the security of the privacy of the was implemented before they went live, and they ignored that as well. So it's not like people didn't talk to them, people haven't advised them, but the government of Barbados has a tendency, and it's not just the government of Barbados, it's it's governments across the region and governments across the world. They do things for expedience, they do things for political points, and a lot of the shortcuts that they take can impact people's lives and adversely.
I am like, this is this for real that I'm listening to? But I know you are professional, and so you know your stuff, sir. If not, I would be doubting you right now, because I cannot believe that we could be allowed to be this exposed. And as Lisa Niles is saying, that the law is now forcing us to get the Trident ID. It's being forcing us to get it. So what is going to happen? Because if it is such a privacy threat for us all, why should I go to get this ID? Mr. Harper, why should the law force me to get it?
National ID systems are very important. The digital ID system, but I'm a big fan of the digital ID system. Let me just put that out there. I'm a big fan of them when they're done the right way. I have seen countries. I've lived in Denmark. I have a residence in Estonia. All these places have digital IDs that are very secure and make your life very efficient. I can renew my passport online. I can renew my driver's license. I can do thousands of things with government online instead of having to leave and go into a government office. I can log into my internet banking securely. I can submit my taxes. I am a big fan of digital ID because it makes your life a lot simpler, but it has to be done right. It has to be done securely, and it has to be done within a privacy rights respecting framework. And that's not what we're doing in Barbados.
As a professional in this area, someone who is trained in cybersecurity, and we're really honored, Mr. Harper, to have you here. If you were speaking to the people of Barbados as a son of the soil, I come to you and I said, Niel, the law says that I need my Trident ID in the state that the ID is in right now. What would you tell me?
I would tell the public of Barbados to put pressure on the government. You put them where they are. You elected them. You give them 30 seats. You've given them 30 seats. You've given them a mandate to act in your best interest. Put them under pressure to fix the security and privacy issues related to this system. Like for example, they're saying that you must have this ID to get a passport. You must have this ID to vote, and I don't wanna agree. And I mentioned that when I wrote my blog and my article. I said you have to create this digital ID within a framework where all type of identification that is verified is accepted. There's no reason I shouldn't be able to go to a voting station on election day and show them my passport and vote. Why should I need the national digital ID when I have been my identity has been proofed and I have been provided with a passport? Why can't I use my driver's license, which again my identity has been proofed for me to receive a driver's license? And the driver's license has on a number of features that prevent it from being cloned or counterfeited. So why does this new digital ID render my passport or my driving license invalid as a document to prove my identity? They should have more than one type of document to prove your identity. So it doesn't make sense to me. Like, why do we need to force people to have one single type of identity? It's good, and I think it will be more beneficial to people when government brings more e-government services online, that you can use your card and the security that's built into the chip that's on the card to log into government services securely and conduct your transactions. Pay your road tax, pay for your driver's license and all those things securely using the digital ID. Right now, we're very far from there. So I don't see why people should be restricted from using any type of valid identity that can prove that they are who they actually are.
This is hitting me in my belly, y'all, because I listened to that man. I listened to the minister with a long exposition about this, and you would think this is the best thing for Barbados. And somebody's asking here, so how do we as citizens protect ourselves? This is where it's at right now, because we don't have an opposition. It's us as citizens.
Yeah, I
So what
mean,
do we do?
you have to put pressure on the government. You have to put pressure on them to prove, like, they have to be more transparent with persons in Barbados. Tell people, what have you done realistically to secure this system? Have you had an expert do a test from outside to make sure the system isn't vulnerable? Are you doing regular testing? Are you doing regular upgrades? Like, what are you doing to realistically protect these systems? How are you protecting people's personal information when it's in these systems? Like, is there a plan to reprint the cards and to add some type of encryption to the QR code? Like, what are you realistically doing? And you have to admit as well that the government has not admit they have done anything wrong. That the government is basically saying to Barbadians, oh, he's a DLP operative, or he's just creating fear and panic. And I'm like me, like, I'm just being factual. No one in the government of Barbados can dispute anything I've said. But they spend too much time looking for political mileage, and they refuse to acknowledge when they've made a mistake, because they want to give people in Barbados this sense that we don't make mistakes, we're infallible.
Right,
And it's wrong.
right. So someone said the card does have a security chip, not just a QR code. Is this what you are saying?
So there's a chip in the card that contains your information. There's a chip on the card, and you put a pin on that chip to protect that information. But that's usually only if you're using the card to interface with another system. Because when digital ID actually works is when you have an ecosystem of services that depend on trusts. Things like trust marks, things like legalization of documents. So, for example, I lived in Denmark. Everyone in the country has a digital certificate that's tied to their digital ID. What a digital certificate does, you use it as a form of authenticity. It's like you signing a document with your signature. So what happens if I pay my lease? So, for example, signing a lease for a car or a house, instead of they sending me a printed document to sign it, they send me the document digitally, and I log into a site with my digital ID and sign it digitally, and you cannot amend that document. That document is protected by encryption, and it has my digital signature embedded in it. So I cannot say it in a court of law, that is not me that signed that, because the only one that could have signed it is me. So that is basically what the security in the chip in the card is actually for, to authenticate, for you to authenticate and provide verification that you are who you are. Or if you're interfacing with a provider like a bank, like an insurance company that needs to verify your information, you can plug it in. If they have a reader at their location, you can push the card into the reader. The card the reader accesses the security chip on the card. You type in your PIN, and that verifies this is this person. Like, the only person who can do this is this person. So that's what is, but that has nothing to do with the scanning of the QR code. Those are two separate
two separate things. Someone here is concerned that, they're saying it's not mandatory, but if you do not take it, you will be denied services and rights, is what is in the bill. So there is a bill.
Yes.
Have you seen the bill?
I've written a detailed a detailed critique of the bill, which talks about the different aspects of the bill that needed to be amended. So, when you're developing legislation, transparency is an important thing. Many countries, they crowdsource feedback on legislation. For a month or 2 months or 3 months, I've seen in Africa when they launch the Treaty on Cyber Security and Personal Data Protection. They actually send it. They send out the draft to the community, whether it be academia, so professors, the technical community, civil society. They send it out and say, could you please review this as experts or as citizens and tell us what your concerns are? And many people sent back in their concerns. We don't do that in Barbados on a regular basis. You will see a draft bill will go to Parliament to be discussed. The bill will be drafted by someone in the government. It will be drafted. It will be sent to Parliament. It may be ventilated a bit in the Bar Association, but usually the Bar Association is not the only person, are the only people who understand the law, or not the only people who understand regulation. Like, for example, like, you said that my background, I actually have a master's in law, in technology law. My master's and specialized in cyber law, privacy law, and national security. Persons like me who are not members of the Bar Association should be providing feedback. People who have disabilities, because does the actual card have on disabilities for people who are blind? I think it does have one thing for Braille for people who are blind, but does the website for the card, does it support disability standards? There's an international standard for people who are blind and deaf or differently able, who should be able onto a website and through hearing or some type of visual or auditory type of the website actually not seeing it. I'm pretty sure that the website for the card does not allow that. So you are not being inclusive and you're not being transparent in terms of getting that feedback from people who these cards will impact. You're only going to the Bar Association, which is 300 persons. Like, you can't only get feedback from 300 persons for a piece of legislation that will impact 300,000. And that's what we tend to do in Barbados. We're not very transparent. We pass these laws. We've been trying to pass the integrity in public life law. They've been ducking and dodging and making changes so that it doesn't impact them. And that law is actually supposed to impact them, but they're making changes. The people in public life who the law has impact are saying, we're going to reduce those fines because those fines are too high. Like, so we're seeing a lot of lack of transparency. So it then impacts people in the country negatively. And that's, there's a lot of concerns with the law in terms of violation of people's rights. And really, I expect if they prevent people from getting a passport or prevent people from the ability to vote or violate other people's rights that are granted in the Constitution of Barbados, it opens the legislation to a constitutional and challenge in court, and then the legislation could be struck down.
This is very serious. Very, very serious. I'm going to ask you to share this with people far and wide. Okay. Very, very important that this, what the gentleman is saying to us today, and he's calling on his fellow Barbadians to put pressure on the government to read this card. And the president of the Democratic Labour Party is calling on Barbadians not to pick up their cards. And I am now seeing the full reason. Before, honestly, I would tell you before the show, I understood that there are some challenges, but I did not realize, Mr. Harper, how serious these challenges were and what a threat it was to our privacy. And so there is a call, and he's also saying that this possibly, he's not a constitutional lawyer, which he told me before the show. He's in internet law and so on, but not a constitutional lawyer. But he's saying that it's a possibility that this could be challenged by constitutional lawyers, and I'm putting a challenge out there, those that love Barbados and love the citizens of Barbados. Barbados is Barbados because of the citizens. And if we're exposed and all of our data, the possibility of going up there, and then we're told by law that we must pick up the IDs, then it seems to me that, like the DLP president is saying, we can't follow that.
Yeah, I want to share something with on you, because this is very, very important. In 2000 well, around 2015, I reached out to the government of Barbados, probably 2016, reached out to the government of Barbados saying, hey, you need to do a cyber security assessment of Barbados as a whole. Look at how the government is managing cybersecurity. You need to do a cybersecurity assessment and do a roadmap so that you have a plan, a strategic plan, how the government is going to address cyber security issues. The government ignored me, like they never responded, they never engaged me. Then, interestingly enough, in 2017, the European Union went to the government of Barbados and said, because we're doing trade with you, because we're funding you, because we have a relationship with you, we want to ensure that you have the right framework and legislation and initiatives and controls in place to build trust online. We're going to send an expert to conduct a cybersecurity assessment and develop a strategic roadmap for Barbados. Incidentally, the person that we're sending, one of our consultants, is actually a Barbadian. So the European Union sent me to assess Barbados after Barbados ignored me, right? So I developed and published to the government of Barbados in 2018, February or March of 2018. I published a detailed cybersecurity assessment and strategic roadmap for 3 years. I provide detailed recommendations for every aspect of improving the cybersecurity in Barbados. Cybersecurity policy and strategy, culture and society, education and training, regulatory framework, standards, operations, everything. The government ignored that. They have not implemented anything from that strategic roadmap. And we were now into 2023. So 5 years have passed and we're at the same place that we were in 2018. So I think, in all fairness, based on the investment, so government, to the best of my knowledge, the government has received funding from either the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, or the European Development Fund to implement this IDD. So I think they're somewhat entrenched in terms of having to deliver this ID. And again, I want to be very clear. I don't want to misrepresent the facts to the people here. The ID, the Trident ID and the digital ID that the government has proposed is a good idea if implemented properly. So the government needs to implement it properly, make sure they're properly considering security, privacy, interoperability, recoverability, and it's all being implemented within a legal and ethical framework that protects the people of Barbados. They have to do it right, but it's not a bad idea if done right. So don't. I'm not saying to people, you know, ignore the ID. All I'm saying that the government needs to take accountability and fix the mistakes they've made and provide the people in Barbados with assurance that going forward, they've considered all of the different elements of implementing the digital ID that can impact the persons in Barbados. So that is my message.
That is your message. And I think that has come over loud and clear. I want to ask you this as my final question. How do you compare the Barbadian approach to digitization to the Jamaican approach and the results? Because remember, Jamaica had come out, I think, in 2017 with NIDS, and then they
Yeah.
had to go back to the drawing board, and they have now said that it's voluntary, and they've done some work. How do you compare the approach of Barbados to Jamaica?
Right. So exactly, I mentioned that there's a potential risk that there can be a constitutional and challenge to the legislation that backs the digital ID, and that's exactly what happened in Jamaica. Lawyers, largely driven by the opposition leader, but again, valid complaints. And I always tell Bajans ignore the politics. A lot of Bajans are dismissing Dr. Yerwood because he's in opposition or he's from another party, but his concerns are valid. And that was the same thing in Jamaica. A lot of people were dismissing the opposition leader, but the constitutional challenge that went to court was successful and the legislation was struck down and they had to go back to the drawing board and develop a more rights respecting legal framework to support the implementation of the digital ID. And I think that's the major difference between Barbados and Jamaica.
What he's saying is that there are some privacy risks, serious privacy risks, because of the lack of encryption on the QR code of the Trident, this Trident ID card, that the minister is asking people to come to pick up your card. And he's saying put pressure. It's also we're sending out a message that, you know, there's a possibility that this will be challenged by constitutional lawyers in Barbados because of the high risk that it poses, and the fact that we're told that you possibly would not be able to do the various services if you don't have it. All right, because it now replaces, according to the minister, what he's saying, that it now replaces your passport and your motor vehicle license and all everything. It's just this one thing, and so on. So this is important that we understand that the same thing that happened in Jamaica can happen, where we send the government back to the drawing board to bring something to the people that will fit, that will work, right? That is safe, that gives us the privacy that is necessary for all citizens. And I think that that is what Mr. Harper is saying. Is there anything that I left out and you want to add?
Yeah, I want to just say as well, you know, the government of Barbados is talking about a lot of different digital transformation. There's a very large dearth, there's a lack of expertise within the government of Barbados in terms of not just privacy and security, but also information technology. You know, the government has to look at a serious workforce development strategy. There are a lot of people that have been in government for 20, 30 years who are nearing retirement who have not upped graded their skills, who do not have the skills and the talent to implement digital transformation in Barbados, especially in a secure and privacy respecting manner. Those people have to be forced into retirement. Tho- You have to replace those people with skilled people who understand how to develop and implement complex technologies that will be storing the personal data of agents, technologies that are intended to improve the lives of agents. You cannot have amateurs implementing digital transformation in Barbados. That's critically important. We have a data privacy commissioner who is responsible for enforcing the Data Protection Act of Barbados. From all accounts, that person is unqualified. That person has said nothing. We've had numerous breaches of people's personal data, the electoral list, the IDB survey with the underage young people. We've had several instances of violations of the data protection laws of Barbados, and we have heard nothing from the Data Privacy Commissioner, who's supposed to act in the best interests of the Bajan people and hold government and corporations accountable for the misuse and abuse of people's personal data. And she has said nothing for the last 2 or 3 years. We need a competent and independent data protection commissioner. She cannot be politically captured. She cannot be reporting to a minister. She needs to be independent. She needs to be reporting to a multifunctional committee or board that consists of people from the private, public, civil society, and different stakeholders and she must have independent funding and independent authority to hold the government accountable. That does not happen right now. So until that happens as well, Bajan's personal data is still at risk. And that's my final thoughts.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Harper. This has been eye-opening, and the people are saying that. And we just want to say we respect you and thank you. And so everybody knows, and nobody's paying him to come on. He doesn't know me from Adams. He doesn't know me. I've never met him in person. And as he said, he's lived in Germany, he's outside of Barbados for a number of years, and he's not been
Just,
paid by any political party. So will you stop it and just take
just
the
one
information,
last point,
please?
please.
Yes,
Just
sir.
one
Yes,
last
sir.
point.
Go ahead.
I see some person in the thread saying that the legislation does not say that the data protection commissioner has to tell us her findings. The legislation does not give her the responsibility to Barbadians. That is blatantly untrue. I want to call that out because that's dangerous thinking. The Barbados Data Protection Act is almost a carbon copy of the general data protection regulations in the European Union. And if you look across countries that have data protection legislation in place that is working, the Data Protection Commission is independent. I will give you an example. In um, in Portugal, last year, the Data Protection Commissioner fined the government of Portugal for not properly processing people's personal data. Listen to me clearly. The Data Protection Commissioner fined the government because the government is also liable to the law. The government is not, there are certain exceptions for the government, for public safety, for law enforcement, but the government does not have clear exceptions from the law. That person is responsible to the people of Barbados. That is not a government. It may be a government position. For one, it's in the wrong location. It doesn't have the right authority. It doesn't have the right funding. Doesn't have the right legislation and levels of independence. So that person is blatantly wrong.
Wow. Okay. Because she's saying that she's never seen that section in our legislation.
So I read the legislation. I actually submitted feedback on the legislation when the legislation was in draft. And I'm telling you, if you read the legislation clearly says that the Data Protection Commission It doesn't say that you have to tell them the findings, but when you investigate, there's a level of transparency that you have to provide to the people of Barbados, because people have to know what are the outcomes
Ah,
of the investigation. If you look at the information commissioner's office in the UK, if you look at all the data protection, and right now, just to be very, very transparent, I'm the data privacy officer. Sorry, I'm the chief privacy officer for one of the largest software companies in the world. I deal with all of the supervisory authorities in Europe and North America, and I'm saying this from experience. The supervisory authorities are accountable to the people of the country. They're protecting the rights. The Data Protection Act is steeped in the protection of human rights, the right to privacy, Article 12 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That legislation is a rights-based piece of legislation, and the responsibility and accountability of the Data Privacy Commissioner is to the people of Barbados and protecting their right to privacy. So that person, if they misread or didn't understand what they read, they need to go back and read again, because they're wrong, dead wrong.
all right. So I just want to thank you so much, Mr. Harper, for being on. And all I can say to you is I could see that someone said that your soul is still here in the Caribbean, and you're educating a lot of people today. And we thank you, for taking the time to do so. Okay. And God bless you, sir. God bless you. Have a good evening. Thanks to everybody who's joined. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. God bless you. Bye bye.